another edition of Reeves Reflection, as we talk about some of my life experiences, and hopefully you can learn some lessons from some of the things that I've done in the past. Today I want to talk to you about confronting a professional disrespect. Okay, now I've talked about this in various other capacities, but I'll kind of break this down here in terms of how I felt that I was disrespected. The situation was I was coming out, and I've shared this story a few different times, but I never talk about how I confronted it in terms of greater detail. So I found myself in a situation where I was working in an office. I was my first job out of college, and I was working at the headquarters office for this state agency that I was working with, and I wanted to take a year off to go to graduate school, and I wanted the state to pay for graduate school while I was there, and then I was going to return back to the office I was working. They had a program which was called educational leave, which gave you the ability to do so, meaning they wouldn't pay for your courses, but what they do is they give you your salary and all your benefits. So I remember speaking to this one assistant director of human resources, and she specifically told me that the program that I was speaking of did not exist. So as a result, I had to I made the decision. I didn't have to. I made the decision to transfer from the headquarters office to a field office so I could go to graduate school. So I get down to graduate school, and probably about a few months after being in my graduate classes and a new location, I found myself at a local conference we had, because we typically would have these regular annual conference meetings, and I went to the conference and I ran across the director of the agency as a whole, who actually was someone who had been following my career within the agency. And I remember him saying, he told me, he said, "Hey, I'm surprised, didn't think that you would actually transfer out of the headquarters office. I thought you liked it up there. You were doing great work." I said, "I loved it up there. But the only way that I could get to my graduate degree was I had to transfer to a field office." And so the guy looks me in the face and says, "Hey, well, why didn't you do the educational leave program? You could have just taken a year off, come back to school, and then came back up." I said, "Well, they told me the leave program wasn't available." And as I said that, the person who told me, who's assistant HR, she walked up and she heard me say that. He said, "What do you mean it's not available?" I said, "I thought it wasn't available." "Did somebody tell you?" This is what the boss tells me. "Did somebody tell you that the educational leave wasn't available?" And so she's standing there with this look in her face, because she's the one who told me this. And so I'm looking at her, and I have a decision to make. Do I tell him that, "Hey, the person who told me is standing right next to you, because had I known this was an option, I would have never transferred out of this office"? And so he's really got this perplexed looks, because, like I said, I had a chance to work with him, and he really liked some of the things that I was doing. So I had to decide, do I blow up the spot and tell him this is what happened, meaning she was the one who told me this, or do I keep that information to myself? And it was funny, because as he said that in real time, I was processing my options as quickly as possible. And what do you mean by processing my options? Well, I had to ask myself the question: if I told the head of this agency that we're a part of what actually happened, what would be the consequences? Meaning, what is the gain? What do I gain other than basically putting her on the spot? It doesn't change my situation. The position that I had was already filled by someone else. There was no opportunity for me to come back up. I had already just transferred. I literally had just signed a brand new lease to my apartment. I was literally in a situation where, regardless of what I said, my circumstances weren't going to change. So I had to make the decision, since I can't undo my situation, do I use this as a mechanism because effectively, do I use this as an opportunity to retaliate? Because that's really what it would come down to. Because if I told him what's up, it kind of comes off as retaliation. Now, for those of you who are listening, you're like, "Well, that's not retaliation. You're telling the truth." You're right. I would be telling the truth. He asked me a question, and I could definitively say, not from a retaliatory standpoint, "Hey, the reason why, because she told me." But I also asked myself the question, what would I gain from doing that? That's the kind of fascinating part when you stop and you think about it, is you say, well, what do you gain from doing that? Now, you could possibly say, well, what you do is you gain the benefit of you telling him this, and then he can ensure that she never gives misinformation like this out ever again. You can ensure that whatever, future action she does, she'll be a little bit more cautious and careful about making sure she gives information that may be beneficial in the long terms to other people, so that they never go through what I went through. But the reality is I don't know. I could say this to him and he could do absolutely nothing with this. It's not like he could reprimand her or write her up or terminate her. He could have terminated her, but I don't know if he could even do that, because in essence, only thing that changes is that I made the transfer decision on my own. So I made the decision to say nothing. I effectively said, okay, well, I was under the impression. And you can kind of see the relief on her face that I didn't blow up her spot. Now, some of you are going to probably say, well, did she come over and thank you? No. But even if she did, I wasn't looking for one. And somebody once when I told the story to another friend, he was like, so basically, you saved her job, or you saved her from getting penalized for what she did. And I said, well, I didn't look at it like that. I just kept thinking in my mind that in the grander scheme of things, what would that energy have gotten me? I mean, even if it would have given me the peace of mind of letting somebody that I respected know that someone within his hierarchy disrespected me or gave me misinformation, what would it achieve? So I had made the calculated decision that it would not have achieved anything, because even if he had that information, there's nothing that would have guaranteed that she would not have done it again. And again, I don't necessarily think she did it with malintention in mind. She might have legitimately not known that was available, but it wasn't my place to go down the rabbit hole of all those circumstances. In my mind, I had convinced myself that, listen, I've already accepted the reality that my circumstances have changed. Me saying something is not going to undo those circumstances. So you might as well just ride out with what you got. And let's just be clear, everyone. Did everything work out for me in the long run? Absolutely. I ended up getting my graduate degree a few short months afterwards. I got commissioned as a naval officer and left working for the state of Florida. And, all the steps of my life along the way fell right into place accordingly. Am I going to say that in every situation like that, you should do what I did? No. But what I am saying is that sometimes you have to ask yourself that if you're put in a position where you have the ability to impact someone else because of something that they did that involved you, you have to sometimes ask yourself a question of what is that energy going to get you? Are you going to gain anything? Is there going to be any benefit? Because the reality is, if you take a particular course of action and you don't know what happens after that, you're just kind of going through the motions of that action. The universe doesn't give you anything for it. So I made the calculated decision that at that particular point in time, I had a choice. I could have said something and kept on moving, or I could have not said something and kept on moving. At the end of the day, I made the decision that in my mind, it was in my best interest just to not say anything and keep on moving. And at the end of the day, I have no idea what was in store for her life. I have no idea as to what the situation presented itself to her. All I know that in the end, I can't be mad because everything worked out well for me. All right, everyone. As always, it's great to have you again here for another edition of the Reeves Reflection. You know you can find me on all things at anthonyreeves.com. And of course, you can find me and listen to me on all his various listening platforms. And as always, I have to end with my favorite question of the day. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?